You burn the family. I'm just burning after you.
The moment I posted Tyler's drawing on Facebook, I knew I'd made a mistake. Not because of the drawing itself. My 5-year-old son had scribbled what looked like a happy family with stick figures and a rainbow. Innocent enough. But within 3 minutes of hitting share, my phone exploded with a call from Lisa Patterson, my brother's ex-wife. A woman I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. "Jake, you need to delete that post right now." Her voice cracked through the speaker like breaking glass. "Don't let Tyler out of your sight." I stared at my phone, then at the drawings still taped to our refrigerator. "Lisa, what the hell are you talking about?" "The drawing. Oh God, Jake, I thought it was over. I thought nobody would ever find out about my stash." My wife Samantha looked up from her laptop at the kitchen table, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. She'd been working late again, or at least, that's what she called whatever she did on that computer every night. Her architectural firm kept her busy, she claimed. Too busy for family dinners, too busy for bedtime stories, too busy for conversations that lasted longer than 30 seconds. "Lisa, slow down," I said, walking into the living room. "What stash?" "The money, Jake. The money, Jake. The money I've been hiding from the divorce settlement." I thought Tyler somehow knew. Thought maybe he'd seen something at my house and drew it. That drawing. It looks like my hiding spot behind the water heater. I almost laughed. Almost. Lisa had always been dramatic, but this was next-level paranoia. My brother David had warned me about her tendency toward conspiracy theories, but I'd forgotten just how deep the rabbit hole went. "You're telling me you've been hiding money from David's divorce lawyer?" Silence. Then a whispered, "Yes." Now I did laugh. Not a nice laugh either. The kind of laugh that comes from a man who's been dealing with his own marital problems and suddenly realizes he's not the only one living a lie. "How much, Lisa?" $40,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. David had been scraping by since their divorce, working 2 jobs just to make his child support payments, while Lisa lived in her fancy downtown condo. My brother, who'd given me a kidney when I was 12, who'd helped me through college, who'd been the best man at my wedding. He'd been getting screwed over by his ex-wife for 3 years. "Jake, please," Lisa continued. "I'll do anything. Just delete the post." Last at Tyler's drawing again. The stick figures were labeled in his kindergarten handwriting. Daddy, Mommy, me. Simple, pure. Everything my life used to be before I found that burner phone in Samantha's laundry basket last week. "Anything?" I asked. "Yes, anything." An idea began forming in my mind. A terrible, wonderful idea that would solve 2 problems at once. I've been looking for a way to test my skills at revenge, to practice for the bigger game I was planning with my cheating wife. Lisa had just volunteered to be my guinea pig. "Meet me at the town festival tomorrow," I said. 2 o'clock, by the main stage. Come alone, and bring a confession letter admitting what you did to David. Handwritten. "Jake, I can't." "You can and you will. Unless you want me to call David right now and tell him about your little secret. Along with a few other people who might be interested. Like the IRS." I hung up before she could respond. Samantha was watching me from the kitchen doorway now, her arms crossed over her chest. Even angry, she was beautiful. Tall, blonde, with the kind of sharp features that belonged in magazine spreads. She'd been the prize catch of our small New England town when I'd married her 10 years ago. Now, she felt more like a trophy that had lost its shine. "What was that about?" she asked. "Family drama," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "Lisa's having some financial problems." Samantha snorted. "When isn't she? That woman's been a train wreck since the divorce." The irony wasn't lost on me. My wife, who'd been sneaking around with her coworker Brent Morrison for the past 3 months, was criticizing someone else's moral failings. I'd seen the messages on that burner phone before she'd gotten smart and changed the password. Hotel receipts, explicit photos, plans for weekend getaways while I stayed home with Tyler. The password had been our anniversary date, October 15th. Even her betrayal was unoriginal. "I'm going to put Tyler to bed," I said. "I'll be up late working," Samantha replied, already turning back to her laptop. "Don't wait up." "Right. I'd driven by her office building last Thursday at 11 p.m., when she'd claimed to be pulling an all-nighter on the Henderson project. The parking lot had been empty except for a security guard's car. But Brent Morrison's silver BMW had been parked outside the Marriott downtown, along with a car that looked suspiciously like my wife's Honda. I found Tyler in his bedroom, building a tower with wooden blocks. He looked up at me with eyes that were exactly like mine, dark brown, serious for a 5-year-old. Sometimes I wondered what he understood about the tension in our house, what he picked up on when Samantha and I had our carefully controlled arguments in whispered voices. "Daddy, look," he pointed to his tower. "It's taller than me." "That's amazing, buddy." I sat down on his small bed, watching him add another block to the precarious structure. "Tyler, do you remember going to Aunt Lisa's house last month?" "Lisa," he nodded. "She was a big water heater in the basement. It makes funny noises." So that's what had triggered Lisa's panic. Tyler had probably mentioned the water heater to Samantha, who'd made some innocent comment about it on social media. Lisa's guilty conscience had done the rest. "Did you see anything else in Aunt Lisa's basement?" Tyler scrunched up his face, thinking. "She had a box behind the water heater. She told me not to touch it because it had important papers." Important papers. $40,000 in cash, more likely. I felt a surge of anger on David's behalf, followed by something darker. Anticipation. Lisa was about to learn what happened when you crossed my family. And after I was done with her, I'd have the practice I needed for dealing with Samantha. I tucked Tyler into bed, read him 2 stories, and kissed his forehead. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too, Daddy." Downstairs, Samantha was still at her laptop, but now she was texting on her personal phone, probably coordinating tomorrow's business meeting with Brent. I'd checked our joint credit card statement that morning. There'd been a charge for 2 dinners at Romano's, the expensive Italian place across town. On a night when she'd claimed to be working late, and I'd eaten leftover pizza with Tyler. "I'm going out for a bit," I announced. She didn't look up. "Where?" "Hard store. Need some supplies for a project." Television blaring in the background. "Homework." This time she did glance at me, suspicious. "What kind of project?" "Manslaughter." "You'll see." Hardware store was closing in 20 minutes, but I had enough time to buy what I needed. 10 pounds of biodegradable confetti, 3 small remote-controlled devices used for party poppers, and a package of industrial-strength double-sided tape. The teenage clerk looked at me like I was planning the world's most elaborate gender reveal party. "Big celebration?" he asked. "You could say that," I replied. Back home, I spent 2 hours in the garage, carefully constructing my devices. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Lisa would get her public humiliation, David would get his justice, and I'd get my practice run. Everyone wins, except for the person who deserved to lose. I went to bed that night with Samantha already asleep, or pretending to be. She was wearing her silk nightgown, the one she used to wear for me but now seemed to save for nights when she'd been texting Brent. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, and I was tempted to try guessing her new password, but I didn't need to. I already had enough evidence to destroy her life when the time came. Instead, I lay awake planning tomorrow's confrontation with Lisa, mentally rehearsing every detail. The location, the timing, the witnesses. In a small town like ours, reputation was everything. Lisa was about to learn that lesson the hard way. And after I was done with her, it would be Samantha's turn. The Millbrook Fall Festival was the kind of small-town event that brought out everyone from teenagers looking for something to do to elderly couples reliving their youth. Main Street had been blocked off, lined with booths selling everything from homemade apple cider to hand-knitted scarves. The main stage sat at the center of it all, where local bands and community groups took turns entertaining the crowd. I arrived early, positioning myself near the stage with a clear view of the surrounding area. Tyler was with my neighbor, Mrs. Krantz, for the afternoon, a woman whose love of gossip would prove useful in the coming weeks. Samantha had begged off, claiming she needed to catch up on work. On a Saturday. Even her lies were getting lazy. At exactly 2 o'clock, Lisa appeared through the crowd. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The guilt was eating at her, which was exactly what I'd been counting on. She spotted me and walked over, clutching a folded piece of paper in her hand. Jake, please. We can work this out privately. David doesn't need to know. David has every right to know, I said. He's been struggling to make ends meet while you've been sitting on a nest egg. Did you bring the confession letter? She held up the paper with a shaking hand. It's all here. Everything you wanted me to write. I took the letter and unfolded it. Lisa's handwriting was neat, careful, like she'd written it multiple times before getting it right. She admitted to hiding $40,000 during the divorce proceedings, detailed where the money came from, her grandmother's inheritance that she'd claimed was much smaller, and apologized to David for the deception. Good, I said, folding the letter and putting it in my jacket pocket. Now we wait. Wait for what? Before I could answer, the current band finished their set, and the festival coordinator, a cheerful woman named Betty Morrison, no relation to Brent, thankfully, took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation this afternoon. Jake Patterson has asked to make an announcement about family matters. Lisa's face went white. Jake, what did you do? While walking up to the stage, leaving her standing in the crowd. Betty handed me the microphone with a smile. Take your time, dear. 3 crowd had grown since I'd arrived. I could see familiar faces scattered throughout. Neighbors, co-workers, people from Tyler's school. Mrs. Krantz was near the front, her eyes bright with curiosity. Perfect. Thank you all for coming out today, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the speakers. I want to talk to you about family, and about doing the right thing when someone you trust betrays that trust. Lisa was pushing through the crowd now, trying to reach the stage, but she was too far back, and there were too many people in her way. 3 years ago, my brother David went through a difficult divorce. Like many of you, I believed that the courts had handled everything fairly, that both parties had been honest about their assets and income. I paused, letting the words sink in. In a small town, everyone knew about David's struggles. He'd been working at the hardware store and doing weekend construction jobs just to keep up with his obligations. Unfortunately, I recently learned that wasn't the case. Some people who should have known better, decided that honesty was optional when it came to legal proceedings. Lisa had stopped trying to reach the stage. She stood frozen in the crowd, her face a mask of horror as she realized what was happening. I reached into my jacket and pulled out one of my remote-controlled devices. Lisa Patterson, would you please step forward? To look at her. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. She walked slowly toward the stage like a condemned prisoner approaching the gallows. Lisa has something she'd like to share with everyone, I continued. Something about honesty and family and doing the right thing. I pressed the button on my remote. The device I'd attached to the underside of the stage exploded in a shower of pink and gold confetti, Lisa's favorite colors, which I remembered from her wedding to David. The crowd gasped, then began to laugh and applaud, thinking it was part of some elaborate celebration. But Lisa knew better. She understood that the confetti was just the opening act. Go ahead, Lisa, I said, holding out the microphone. Tell everyone about the $40,000. She took the microphone with trembling hands. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might try to run or make up some story. But the weight of 3 years of guilt, combined with the public attention and the knowledge that I had her written confession, broke her resolve. I hid money during my divorce, she said, her voice barely audible through the speakers. Money that should have been split with David. $40,000 from my grandmother's inheritance. The laughter died. The crowd grew quiet, sensing that this wasn't the celebration they'd expected. I've been living in my downtown condo while David worked 2 jobs to pay child support, she continued, tears streaming down her face. I told myself I deserved it, that he'd hurt me during the marriage. But that wasn't true. I was just selfish and greedy. I pressed the second button on my remote. Another explosion of confetti, this time from a device hidden in the nearby oak tree. The pink and gold pieces fluttered down like snow, covering Lisa's hair and shoulders. Thank you for your honesty, Lisa, I said, taking back the microphone. I'm sure David will appreciate finally knowing the truth. I pressed the third and final button. The largest device, hidden behind the festival banner, erupted in a massive shower of confetti that covered half the crowd. But this time, Mixed in with the pink and gold pieces were photocopies of Lisa's confession letter, dozens of them, floating down like leaves, ensuring that everyone present would have a copy to take home. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some people were laughing. Others were picking up the confession letters and reading them. Lisa stood in the center of it all, covered in confetti, sobbing as neighbors and former friends stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. I stepped down from the stage and walked over to her. "The money needs to be returned to David within a week," I said quietly. "All of it, plus interest. And you're going to call him tonight to apologize." She nodded, unable to speak. "Oh, and Lisa? If you ever try to screw over my family again, what happened here today will seem like a gentle warning." I walked away, leaving her standing in the ruins of her reputation. The confetti would be cleaned up by tomorrow, but the damage to her standing in the community would last for years. In a town like Millbrook, everyone would know what she'd done within hours. Her social life, her business relationships, her chances of dating anyone decent, all of it was gone. As I drove home, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. The plan had worked perfectly. Lisa had been publicly humiliated. David would get his money back. And I'd proven to myself that I could orchestrate complex revenge scenarios without breaking any laws or resorting to violence. But more importantly, I'd sent a message to anyone who might be thinking about betraying my family, including my wife. I found Samantha in the kitchen when I got home, still at her laptop. She looked up as I walked in, covered in pink and gold confetti. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Family business," I said, brushing confetti off my jacket. Lisa had some things she needed to get off her chest. Samantha's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then back at me. "Mrs. Krantz is posting something on Facebook about Lisa Patterson and stolen money. What's that about?" "Ask Lisa," I said. "I'm sure she'd love to explain it to you." I went upstairs to shower, leaving Samantha to piece together the story from social media posts and neighborhood gossip. By the time I came back down, she was on the phone with her friend Megan Walsh, her business partner at the architectural firm. "I know, it's crazy," she was saying. "Jake was involved somehow, but he won't tell me the details." I smiled to myself as I walked past her toward the garage. Phase 1 of my education in revenge was complete. Lisa had been the warm-up act, the practice run. Now it was time to start preparing for the main event. In the garage, I opened my laptop and began researching private investigators. Not to hire one. I couldn't afford that luxury on my electrician's salary. But to learn their techniques. How to conduct surveillance without being detected. How to gather evidence that would hold up in court. How to document infidelity in ways that would be useful in divorce proceedings. Samantha thought she was being clever with her burner phone and her secret meetings, but she was about to learn that her husband was much smarter than she'd given him credit for. And unlike Lisa, who'd gotten off with mere public humiliation, Samantha's betrayal was going to cost her everything. I spent the next 3 hours reading about surveillance techniques, divorce law, and asset protection. By the time I was done, I had the foundation of a plan that would make Lisa's festival humiliation look like a gentle reprimand. The confetti had been just the beginning. Monday morning brought the first signs that my lesson with Lisa had achieved its intended effect. David called me at 7 a.m., his voice a mixture of shock and gratitude. "Jake, what the hell did you do to Lisa?" I was in the kitchen, making coffee while Samantha got ready for work upstairs. Tyler was still asleep, giving me privacy for the conversation. "I helped her find her conscience," I said. "Did she call you?" "At midnight last night. Crying, apologizing, promising to transfer the money back to me this week. She said you had proof of what she'd done." Crimson. I had her written confession. She volunteered it. Trembling. David was quiet for a moment. $40,000, Jake. That's almost 2 years of child support payments. I could quit the weekend construction job. Maybe go back to school like I wanted to. The satisfaction in his voice made my own satisfaction complete. This was why revenge worked, not just to punish the guilty, but to restore balance to the innocent. "She deserved what she got," I said, "and more. The whole town's talking about it. Mrs. Morrison from the hardware store said there was confetti everywhere. that Lisa broke down crying in front of everyone. Theft. Good. Maybe next time she'll think twice before screwing over family. Iset. I poured my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, thinking about the next phase of my plan. Lisa had been easy, guilt-ridden, paranoid, already on the edge of confession. Samantha would be different. She was confident, careful, and completely convinced that she was smarter than me. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, dressed in one of her expensive business suits. Navy blue, tailored to perfection. The kind of outfit that cost more than I made in a week. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup flawless, despite the early hour. "I'm working late tonight," she announced, not looking at me as she grabbed her purse and keys. "The Henderson project is behind schedule." The Henderson project, her go-to excuse for everything lately. I'd looked it up on her firm's website. It was a small office renovation that should have been completed months ago. Either Megan Walsh was the most incompetent architect in New England, or my wife was using the project as cover for her affair. "What time should I expect you home?" I asked. 10, maybe 11. Don't wait up." She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a business transaction than affection, and headed for the garage. I listened to her car pull out of the driveway, then went upstairs to check on Tyler. He was awake, sitting in bed with his stuffed elephant, looking thoughtful in that serious way 5-year-olds sometimes managed. "Daddy, why was Mommy sad this morning?" Sluggish. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean, buddy?" "Like when Grandma died." Out of the mouths of babes. Tyler had picked up on something I'd missed, or maybe chosen not to see. Samantha hadn't just looked distracted this morning. She'd looked genuinely upset. Guilty, maybe. Or scared. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems at work," I said. "It doesn't mean anything's wrong with our family." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Everything was wrong with our family. The question was whether it could be fixed, or if it was too late for anything but damage control. I got Tyler ready for school, dropped him off at kindergarten, and then drove to my own job at Morrison Electric. The irony of working for Betty Morrison's husband wasn't lost on me. The same woman who'd handed me the microphone for Lisa's public humiliation now depended on me to keep her husband's business running smoothly. Tom Morrison was waiting for me in the office, a grin on his weathered face. "Jake, you son of a witch. Betty's been talking about that festival stunt all weekend. She said Lisa Patterson looked like she'd been hit by a truck." Lisa had some things she needed to get off her chest, I said, the same line I'd used with Samantha. $40,000, from what I heard. That's a hell of a thing to keep secret. Tom shook his head. "Your brother's lucky to have you looking out for him." Restless. If only Tom knew what I was planning for my own family situation. But that was the difference between Lisa and Samantha. Lisa's betrayal had been about money, something that could be fixed with a bank transfer and a public apology. Samantha's betrayal went deeper. She'd broken something that couldn't be repaired with confetti and clever staging. I spent the morning rewiring a restaurant kitchen, my hands working automatically while my mind planned the evening's surveillance. Samantha claimed to be working late, which meant she'd either be at the office, unlikely, given that I'd already confirmed it was empty during her previous late nights, or meeting Brent somewhere. During my lunch break, I drove to Walsh & Associates, the architectural firm where Samantha worked. It was housed in a converted Victorian mansion downtown, all glass and steel additions grafted onto 19th century bones. Expensive, modern, the kind of place that charged premium prices for basic services. Megan Walsh's BMW was in the parking lot, along with 2 other cars I didn't recognize. No sign of Samantha's Honda, which meant she was either at a client meeting or already setting up tonight's rendezvous with Brent. I parked across the street and called the office number from my cell phone. "Walsh & Associates, this is Jennifer," a receptionist answered. "Hi, I'm trying to reach Samantha Patterson. Is she available?" Clang, roommate. "Mrs. Patterson is at a client meeting this afternoon. Can I take a message?" No message. "Do you know when she'll be back?" Slashing. "She's scheduled to return around 4:30. I thanked Jennifer and hung up. So Samantha was legitimately at work, at least for now. That gave me time to prepare for the evening's surveillance. I spent the afternoon finishing the restaurant job and thinking about equipment. I couldn't afford professional surveillance gear, but I didn't need it. A decent camera, a pair of binoculars, and patience would be enough to document whatever Samantha was planning. At 5 o'clock, I drove home to find Tyler already there, being watched by Mrs. Krantz. The elderly woman was practically vibrating with excitement about the weekend's drama. "Jake, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what exactly happened with Lisa Patterson? The whole neighborhood's been talking about it." Mrs. Krantz was exactly the kind of person I needed on my side, connected to every gossip network in town, trusted by the other neighbors, and completely unaware that she was being used as a weapon. "Lisa had been hiding money from David's divorce," I said. "I thought it was time for the truth to come out." $40,000. Can you imagine? And poor David working himself to end while she lived in that fancy condo. Mrs. Krantz shook her head. "You did the right thing, exposing her like that. Sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions," I said. "Indeed they do. Indeed they do." After Mrs. Krantz left, I made dinner for Tyler and myself. Grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, his favorite. We ate at the kitchen table while he told me about his day at school, his teacher, his friends. Normal father-son conversation. The kind of thing that made the upcoming destruction of his family feel like a necessary evil rather than a choice. At 7 o'clock, I called my boxing coach, Richie Santos, and asked if he could watch Tyler for a few hours. "Hot date with the wife?" Richie asked. "Something like that," I said. Richie arrived 30 minutes later, a compact man in his 50s with scarred knuckles and the kind of street wisdom that came from growing up in Boston's rougher neighborhoods. He'd been training me for 2 years, teaching me discipline and control, lessons that were about to prove useful in ways he'd never intended. "You look tense," he observed as I grabbed my jacket. "Everything okay at home?" "Just some things I need to take care of," I said. I said training to visit Lee with whether students with left in his money. "Just some things I need to take care of." I said Tyler. I said that we need today the world. I said Janker. I said I jump it. I said I call them the world friends. I said Janker, how Tyler by the Tyler with 2 years. I said Janker. I said I'm called myself. I said I myself. I said I myself change. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I myself change. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. I said Janker. I said I'm called me with left in his money. Asking if he could watch Tyler for a few hours. "Hot date with the wife?" Richie asked. "Something like that," I said. Richie arrived tomorrow. "Take care of," I said. "You want some advice? Whatever's eating at you, deal with it straight. No dancing around, no games. Hit it head on." If only it were that simple. But Richie was right about one thing. It was time to stop dancing around the truth and start documenting it. I drove downtown and parked near the Marriott, the same hotel where I'd seen Brent's BMW last week. It was 8:15, and the parking lot was mostly empty. No sign of either Samantha's Honda or Brent's car. I waited. Surveillance, I'd learned from my research, was mostly about patience and preparation. I had a thermos of coffee, a camera with a telephoto lens, and a notebook to record times and details. Most importantly, I had the angry focus of a man who'd been lied to for months. At 9:20, Brent's BMW pulled into the parking lot. He parked near the back, away from the streetlights, and sat in his car for several minutes, probably texting Samantha, coordinating their arrival to avoid being seen together. Brent Morrison, no relation to Tom Morrison, thankfully, was everything I wasn't. Tall, handsome in a generic way, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to work for anything. He'd joined Walsh & Associates 6 months ago as a project manager, bringing what Megan called fresh perspective to the firm. What he'd really brought was a willingness to sleep with married women. At 9:35, Samantha's Honda pulled into the lot. She parked 3 spaces away from Brent, another amateur move that proved she'd never done this kind of thing before. A professional cheater would have used separate hotels, different nights, better operational security. I raised my camera and started taking pictures. Samantha getting out of her car, looking around nervously. Brent approaching her, putting his hand on her lower back in a gesture that was clearly intimate. The two of them walking into the hotel together, Brent's arm around her waist. The photos were clear, well lit, and legally obtained from a public parking lot. They would be devastating in divorce court. I waited another hour, documenting their exit from the hotel. More intimate gestures, a long kiss by Samantha's car, Brent helping her with her jacket. The kind of tender moments that should have belonged to her husband. By the time I got home, it was nearly midnight. Richie was asleep on the couch, Tyler was in bed, and Samantha's side of our bed was still empty. She'd probably go home to her apartment, the one I wasn't supposed to know about, and shower before coming home with some story about working late at the office. I downloaded the photos to my laptop and stored them in an encrypted folder. Then I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and planning the next phase of my campaign. Lisa had been about money and public humiliation. Samantha would be about systematic destruction. Her career, her finances, her reputation, her future. She wanted to play games with our family? Fine. But she was about to learn that her husband played for keeps. The confetti had been child's play. What came next would be war. Samantha came home at 12:40 a.m., moving quietly through the house like she was trying not to wake anyone. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, but I could smell Brent's cologne on her skin and the scent of hotel soap in her hair. "How was work?" I asked softly. She stiffened beside me. "Fine. Long day. The Henderson project is more complicated than we thought." Another lie, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd been practicing. I wondered how many other lies I'd accepted over the past few months. How many obvious signs I'd chosen to ignore. "Megan keeping you busy?" "You know how she is. Perfectionist." I knew exactly how Megan Walsh was. Ambitious, ruthless, and completely willing to cover for her business partner's affair if it kept their firm running smoothly. What I didn't know yet was how deep her involvement went, or whether she was just enabling Samantha's betrayal, or actively participating in it. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove Tyler to school myself. Then I parked across from Walsh & Associates and settled in for a day of surveillance. If Samantha was using work as cover for her affair, I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. At 9:15, Megan Walsh arrived in her silver BMW, followed 10 minutes later by Brent Morrison. No sign of Samantha, which was interesting. If she was legitimately working on client projects, she should have been at the office by now. I called the firm's main number from my cell phone. "Walsh & Associates, this is Jennifer. Hi, I'm trying to reach my wife, Samantha Patterson. Is she in today?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson called in sick this morning. Can I take a message?" Selfish. While I was sitting outside her office, watching her coworkers arrive for what was apparently a normal workday, I thanked Jennifer and hung up, then immediately called our home number. No answer. I drove home and found Samantha's Honda in the garage, but the house was empty. Her purse was gone, along with the overnight bag she kept in our bedroom closet. Wherever she was planning to be there for a while. I checked our joint credit card account online. There had been a charge that morning at 9 a.m. for 2 nights at the Lakeside Inn, a bed and breakfast about an hour north of town. The same credit card she'd used for her dinners with Brent, because apparently she thought I was too stupid to check our statements. The Lakeside Inn. I'd proposed to Samantha there 8 years ago, during a romantic weekend getaway that had felt like the beginning of our perfect life together. Now, She was using it as the setting for her affair, turning our memories into weapons against our marriage. I spent the rest of the morning researching the inn's layout, studying photos on their website, planning my approach. The property was isolated, surrounded by woods, with only one access road. Perfect for privacy, terrible for operational security. But I didn't want to catch them in bed together. That would be too easy, too simple. What I wanted was leverage, evidence that would give me complete control over the divorce proceedings and custody arrangements. I picked up Tyler from school at 3 o'clock, took him to McDonald's for an early dinner, and then dropped him off with Mrs. Krantz for the evening. "Another work emergency?" she asked, clearly hoping for gossip. "Something like that," I said. I drove to the lakeside inn as the sun was setting, painting the lake in shades of orange and gold that reminded me of Lisa's confetti. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to destroy my marriage at the same place where I'd started it. Samantha's Honda was parked behind the main building, next to Brent's BMW. Room 12, according to the registration I'd glimpsed through the office window. The same room where we'd stayed during our engagement weekend. I didn't approach the room directly. Instead, I found a position in the woods about 50 yards away, with a clear view of their window. The curtains were partially open, and I could see movement inside. 2 figures silhouetted against the warm light. I raised my camera and began documenting everything. The intimate dinner they shared by the window. The wine they drank from glasses that should have been mine. The way Brent touched her face with a tenderness that made my chest ache with something that might have been loss or might have been rage. But the real prize came later, when they stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the lake. Samantha was wearing the silk nightgown she'd claimed to save for special occasions that apparently didn't include her husband. Brent had his arms around her from behind, and they were talking quietly, planning something. I adjusted my camera's telephoto lens and activated the audio recording function on my phone. The conversation was faint but audible. "Can't keep doing this," Samantha was saying. "Jake's getting suspicious." Tightened. "Then leave him," Brent replied. "We've talked about this. You're not happy with him anyway." "It's not that simple. There's Tyler to think about, and the house, and the money. You're worried about the money." Samantha pulled away from him, turning to face the lake. "I've worked for 10 years to build my career. I'm not going to throw it away for what? For me?" The hurt in Brent's voice was almost comical. He actually thought this was about love, about choosing between 2 men. He didn't understand that for Samantha, it was about having her cake and eating it too. Keeping the security of marriage while enjoying the excitement of an affair. "That's not what I meant," Samantha said quickly. "I just need more time to figure things out." "How much more time?" "We've been talking about this for months." Missiles. Not the 3 months I'd suspected, but longer, much longer. I thought back to the changes in Samantha's behavior, the distance that had grown between us, the excuses and late nights. How long had I been living with a stranger? They went back inside and I spent another hour documenting their activities through the partially open curtains. By the time I left, I had dozens of photos and nearly an hour of audio recordings that would be devastating in divorce court. But more importantly, I had a complete understanding of my wife's mindset. She wasn't planning to leave me for Brent. She was planning to string both of us along indefinitely, maintaining her comfortable life while pursuing her exciting affair. That changed everything. I drove home in the darkness, thinking about strategy. Lisa's punishment had been swift and public, designed to humiliate her in front of the entire community. Samantha's punishment would need to be more sophisticated, more complete. She wanted to play a long game? Fine. I'd show her what a real long game looked like. I found Mrs. Krantz waiting for me in my living room, Tyler asleep on her lap, while she watched the late news. "How was your work emergency?" she asked as I lifted Tyler and carried him upstairs to bed. "Complicated," I said, "but I think I know how to handle it now." I set Mrs. Krantz left. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and began planning Samantha's destruction. It would take weeks, maybe months, but when I was finished, she would lose everything: her job, her lover, her reputation, and her son. She thought she was playing me for a fool. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The confetti had been a warning shot. The surveillance had been intelligence gathering. What came next would be total war, fought with weapons she didn't even know existed, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in patience and preparation. I went to work every day, came home to my family every evening, and played the role of the oblivious husband while systematically gathering evidence of my wife's betrayal. Samantha had settled into a comfortable routine of deception. Monday and Wednesday evenings were client meetings that lasted until 10 p.m. Friday afternoons were site visits that stretched into overnight trips. Weekends often included emergency consultations that required her immediate attention. Each lie was documented, cross-referenced, and added to my growing file of evidence. Credit card receipts, hotel registrations, phone records, photographs, audio recordings. I was building a case that would be absolutely devastating in divorce court. But documentation was only the first phase of my plan. The second phase involved Megan Walsh. I've been watching Megan carefully, studying her patterns and relationships. She was Samantha's business partner, best friend, and primary enabler. She provided alibis, covered for absences, and generally made the affair possible through her willful blindness and active cooperation. More importantly, Megan had secrets of her own. I discovered this by accident while following Samantha to what I thought was another rendezvous with Brent. Instead, she met Megan at an expensive restaurant downtown, where they spent 2 hours in intense conversation over wine and appetizers. I couldn't hear their conversation from my position across the street, but their body language told a story of stress, conflict, and mutual dependence. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't architecture. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Chen, a former police detective who specialized in corporate fraud and marital investigations. He was expensive, but I'd been saving money for months, preparing for the divorce I knew was coming. "I need you to look into Walsh & Associates," I told him during our meeting at a coffee shop across town. "Specifically, I want to know if they're billing clients for work that isn't being done." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Insurance fraud? Time fraud. My wife claims to be working late nights and weekends on client projects, but I have reason to believe she's using company time for personal activities. And you want me to prove it. I want you to document it, thoroughly." Marcus spent a week investigating Walsh & Associates' billing practices, client communications, and project timelines. What he found was even better than I'd hoped. "Your wife and her business partner have been systematically overbilling clients," he reported during our second meeting. "They're charging for 40-hour work weeks on projects that require maybe 20 hours of actual work. The excess time is being used for personal activities, affairs, shopping trips, spa days, you name it." "How much money are we talking about?" "Convertatively, about $50,000 over the past year, possibly more. $50,000. Enough to destroy both women's careers and potentially result in criminal charges. But I wasn't interested in sending my wife to prison. I wanted something much more satisfying than that. Can you document everything? Times, dates, specific instances of fraud?" "Already done." Marcus handed me a thick folder. Bank records, client invoices, security camera footage from the office building, cell phone location data. Everything you need to prove systematic fraud. I paid Marcus his fee and took the folder home, where I spent the evening studying its contents. The evidence was overwhelming, detailed, and absolutely damning. Megan and Samantha had been running a sophisticated scam, using their clients' trust and their firm's reputation to fund their personal lives. But the beautiful thing about the evidence wasn't just its completeness. It was its flexibility. I could use it to destroy both women immediately, or I could use it as leverage to control them completely. I chose control. The next Friday evening, while Samantha was supposedly at another client meeting, I drove to Megan Walsh's house in the expensive part of town. It was a modern colonial with a 3-car garage and a perfectly manicured lawn, the kind of house that required serious money to maintain. Money that came from defrauding clients. Megan answered the door in yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked surprised to see me, but not alarmed. Yet. Jake, what brings you by? Is Samantha with you? Samantha's at work, I said. At least that's what she told me. Can we talk? Megan hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. Her house was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture, original artwork, the kind of tasteful luxury that screamed, successful professional. What's this about? She asked as we sat in her living room. I opened the folder Marcus had prepared and spread some of the documents on her coffee table. Bank records, billing statements, timesheets. Megan's face went white as she recognized what she was looking at. This is about fraud, I said calmly. Specifically, the systematic overbilling you and my wife have been engaged in for the past year. Springfield set down her wine glass with a shaking hand. I don't know what you're talking about. $50,000, Megan. That's how much you've stolen from your clients, while my wife was off screwing Brent Morrison. The name hit her like a physical blow. She actually flinched, confirming what I'd suspected. She knew about the affair and had been actively covering for it. Jake, listen. No, you listen. I leaned forward, letting her see the cold fury in my eyes. You've been helping my wife destroy our marriage while stealing money from innocent clients. That makes you complicit in both the infidelity and the fraud. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Megan stared at the documents spread across her coffee table, her mind clearly racing through options and consequences. She was smart enough to understand that the evidence was overwhelming, detailed enough to destroy her career and possibly send her to prison. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you to stop enabling my wife's affair. I want you to start telling me the truth about her activities. And I want you to help me document every lie she's told, every meeting she's missed, every client she's betrayed. You want me to spy on my business partner? I want you to choose between prison and cooperation, because those are your only options. Megan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence of her crimes. When she looked up, there was something like resignation in her eyes. If I help you, what happens to the fraud investigation? That depends on how helpful you are. She nodded slowly. What do you need to know? For the next hour, Megan told me everything. The affair had been going on for 8 months, not the 3 I'd originally suspected. Samantha had been using company resources to fund her activities, charging personal expenses to client accounts, using the office for private meetings, even borrowing money from the firm's operating account for her hotel bills. More damaging, she'd been actively sabotaging client relationships to create more opportunities for her affair. Projects that should have been completed in weeks were being stretched out for months, giving her excuses for extended absences and overnight trips. She's going to destroy the firm, Megan said finally. I've been trying to hold things together, but the clients are getting suspicious. The Henderson project should have been finished 3 months ago. The Henderson project, Samantha's go-to excuse for everything. I almost laughed at the irony. She'd been using a fictional crisis to cover up a real one. Here's what's going to happen, I said, gathering up the documents. You're going to start documenting everything Samantha does. Every lie, every absence, every fraudulent charge. You're going to help me build a case that will destroy her completely. And if I refuse? Amron, I tapped the folder. Then this goes to the State Attorney General's office, Monday morning, along with a detailed complaint about your billing practices. You'll be in handcuffs by Tuesday. Megan closed her eyes. You're asking me to betray my best friend. I'm asking you to choose between your best friend and your freedom. What's it going to be? Sheik opened her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been respect. You're not the man I thought you were. Relinquith. No, I said, standing up. I'm not. Last I left Megan's house with a new ally and a complete understanding of my wife's betrayal. The affair was worse than I'd suspected. The financial fraud was extensive, and Samantha's disregard for our marriage was absolute. But now I had leverage over both women, detailed evidence of their crimes, and a plan that would destroy them both systematically and completely. The confetti had been child's play. The surveillance had been intelligence gathering. What came next would be the complete annihilation of everything Samantha had built, everything she cared about. Everything she thought she could take for granted. She wanted to play games with our family? Fine. But the game was over, and I had already won. 3 days after my meeting with Megan, everything changed. I came home from work to find Tyler sitting at the kitchen table with his crayons, drawing another picture. But this one was different from his usual happy family scenes. This one showed stick figures that were clearly arguing. One with long yellow hair like Samantha's, one with short brown hair like mine, and a small figure in the corner that looked sad and alone. "What's that, buddy?" I asked, sitting down beside him. "Mommy and Daddy fighting," he said matter-of-factly. "Like yesterday, when you thought I was sleeping." My blood went cold. Samantha and I had been careful to keep our arguments quiet, to maintain the illusion of normalcy for Tyler's sake. But 5-year-olds were more perceptive than adults gave them credit for. "What did you hear, Tyler?" Trembling, coloring, not looking at me. "Mommy was crying. She said she was sorry about something. You said bad words." The conversation he was referring to had happened 2 nights ago, when Samantha had come home late again, with another transparent lie about client meetings. I'd confronted her in our bedroom, demanding to know where she'd really been. She'd broken down crying, but hadn't confessed, just kept insisting that I was being paranoid and controlling. I'd said some things I probably shouldn't have said, and apparently, Tyler had heard them. "Sometimes grown-ups argue," I told him, "but that doesn't mean we don't love you." "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" Theft hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I didn't know the answer. I'd known for weeks that divorce was inevitable, but because Tyler had figured it out on his own. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Jimmy's parents got divorced, and they used to fight like you and Mommy. Now Jimmy lives with his dad and only sees his mom on weekends, at my son's drawing, seeing our family's destruction through his innocent eyes." The sad little figure in the corner looked exactly like Tyler, caught in the middle of something he didn't understand, suffering for choices he hadn't made. That night, after Tyler was asleep, I made a decision that changed everything. I called Brent Morrison. His number had been easy to find. It was listed on Walsh & Associates' website, along with his professional headshot and a bio that made him sound like the second coming of Frank Lloyd Wright. In reality, he was a mediocre project manager who'd stumbled into an affair with a married woman and thought he'd won the lottery. He answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Brent. This is Jake Patterson, Samantha's husband. We need to talk." Shimmer. Then, "I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a great idea, unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in front of your coworkers, or your parents, or the state licensing board. What do you want?" "I want you to meet me at Murphy's Bar on Main Street. 1 hour. Come alone." Murphy's was the kind of dive bar where serious conversations happened. Dark, quiet, with booths that provided privacy, and a bartender who minded his own business. I arrived first, choosing a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. Brent showed up exactly on time, looking nervous and overdressed in his expensive suit. He spotted me immediately and walked over, his hands shaking slightly as he sat down across from me. "Before you say anything," he began, "I want you to know that I never meant for this to happen. Samantha and we just..." "Shut up," calmly. "You're going to listen, and I'm going to talk. Understand?" "Good. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end your affair with my wife, tonight. You're going to tell her that you've realized what you're doing is wrong, that you can't continue seeing a married woman, and that you think she should work on her marriage." "I can't do that. I love her." I almost laughed. "You love her? You've been screwing her in hotel rooms for 8 months, while her 5-year-old son asks me why Mommy's never home. That's not love, Brent. That's selfishness. You don't understand. Samantha's not happy with you. She hasn't been happy for years. And that gives you the right to destroy my family?" Leaned forward, and for a moment I saw a flash of the arrogance that had made him think he could steal another man's wife without consequences. "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed someone else." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest, the same feeling I got in the boxing ring when an opponent made a mistake that left them open for a devastating counterpunch. "You think I'm a bad husband?" I asked quietly. "I think you're a blue-collar guy who married above his station and never figured out how to keep his wife interested." That was his mistake. The moment when his arrogance overcame his fear, when he decided to attack instead of apologize. It was also the moment when I stopped seeing him as a misguided fool and started seeing him as an enemy who deserved everything that was about to happen to him. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Let me show you something interesting." I dismissing the contents across the table. Photographs from the Lakeside Inn, bank records showing fraudulent billing, email exchanges between Brent and Samantha discussing their affair, and a detailed timeline of their activities over the past 8 months. Brent's face went white as he recognized what he was looking at. "This is everything," I said. "Every lie, every stolen hour, every fraudulent charge. Enough evidence to destroy both your careers and possibly send you to prison for fraud. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. Timestamps, credit card records, security camera footage, witness statements. I've been documenting your affair for weeks, Brent. I know where you've been, when you've been there, and how much stolen money you've spent." Leaned forward, letting him see the cold fury in my eyes. "But here's the interesting part. I don't want to destroy you. I want to give you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You can end the affair tonight and disappear from our lives forever. Move to another state, find another job, start over somewhere else. Do that, and these documents stay in my safe. And if I don't? Then Monday morning, copies of everything go to your boss, your professional licensing board, the state attorney general's office, and every major client Walsh & Associates has ever served. By Tuesday, you'll be unemployed. By Friday, you'll be under criminal investigation." Brent stared at the evidence spread across the table, his mind clearly racing through options and consequences. He was smart enough to understand that I had him completely trapped, but arrogant enough to look for a way out. "You're bluffing," he said finally. "You won't destroy Samantha's career just to get back at me." I smiled, and something in my expression made him flinch. "You're right. I won't destroy Samantha's career just to get back at you. I'll destroy it to get back at her. You're just collateral damage. She'll never forgive you. She'll never forgive me anyway. The question is whether you're going to be smart enough to save yourself or stupid enough to go down with her." Brent was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs of himself with my wife. When he looked up, there was something like defeat in his eyes. "If I end it with Samantha, you'll really keep this quiet? If you end it tonight, move out of state within 2 weeks, and never contact my wife again, then yes, these documents disappear forever. And if I see her again, then you'll discover what a blue-collar guy can do when someone threatens his family." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Brent understood that I wasn't just talking about legal consequences anymore. I was talking about physical ones. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll do it." "Good. Call her now." "Now?" "Right now, while I'm sitting here. Put it on speaker." Brent pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed Samantha's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and intimate in a way she hadn't spoken to me in months. "Brent? I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight." "Samantha, we need to talk. About us." "What about us?" His upset, Brent glanced at me, then back at his phone. "I can't do this anymore. The affair, the lying, the sneaking around, it's not right." Silenced. Then, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over. I think you should work on your marriage. Try to make things right with Jake and Tyler." "Brent, what's wrong? You're scaring me." "Nothing's wrong. I realize that what we're doing is hurting people. Good people. And I can't be part of that anymore." More silence. Then Samantha's voice. "We have other things that Jake and Tyler, cold and suspicious. Where are you right now?" Brent looked at me again. I shook my head slightly. "I'm at home," he lied. "I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I've made my decision. We're done, Samantha. Please, I'm sorry. I really am. But this is how it has to be." He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking as he put the phone back in his pocket. "There," he said. "It's done." "Good. Now pack your things and get out of town. You have 2 weeks." I gathered up the documents and put them back in the envelope. Brent sat in the booth, looking like a man who just watched his life collapse in real time. "For what it's worth," he said as I stood up, "I really did love her." "No," I replied. You loved the idea of her. There's a difference. I left him sitting in the bar and drove home, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been relief. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Brent was out of the picture, scared enough to run and smart enough to stay away. But Phase 2 was just beginning. Samantha would be calling soon, demanding answers, looking for someone to blame. And I was going to be ready for her. The real confrontation was about to begin. Samantha's Honda was in the driveway when I got home, which meant she'd raced back from wherever she'd been when Brent called. I found her in the kitchen, pacing back and forth with her phone in her hand, her face flushed with anger and confusion. "Where have you been?" she demanded as I walked in. "Out," I said calmly. "Why?" "Something's wrong with Brent. He called me tonight and ended things. Said he couldn't be part of an affair anymore. It didn't sound like him at all." I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, taking my time with the cap. Maybe he grew a conscience. "This isn't funny, Jake. Something's wrong." I turned to her, letting her see the cold knowledge in my eyes. "You're right. Something is wrong. The question is, how long are you going to keep pretending you don't know what it is?" "Samantha, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your affair with Brent Morrison. I'm talking about the 8 months of lies, the fraudulent billing, the hotel rooms, and the complete destruction of our marriage." The color face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny everything, might try to maintain the charade for a few more minutes. Then something in my expression told her it was over. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Long enough to document everything. Every lie, every meeting, every stolen dollar. Long enough to build a case that will destroy you completely." Samantha sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her hands shaking. "Jake, please, let me explain." "Explain what? How you've been stealing from your clients to fund your affair? How you've been using our son as cover for your lies? How you've been planning to string both me and Brent along indefinitely while you figured out which life you wanted?" She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Samantha? Were you planning to leave me for him? Or were you just going to keep both of us on the hook forever?" "I don't know." I was confused, unhappy, polishing. Unhappy. I sat down across from her, close enough to see the fear in her eyes. "You were unhappy, so you decided to commit fraud and infidelity? That's your excuse? You don't understand what it's been like. We never talk anymore, never spend time together. You come home from work and disappear into the garage or go to the boxing gym. I felt like I was living with a stranger. So you decided to sleep with another stranger. That makes perfect sense," emphasized. Samantha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know you're angry." I laughed, and the sound made her flinch. "Samantha, angry doesn't begin to cover what I'm feeling right now. You've destroyed our marriage, traumatized our son, and committed felony fraud. And you think I'm angry? What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. But they did go this far. And now, we have to deal with the consequences." Samantha leaned forward, reaching for my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. "Jake, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over. Relinquo." "I over?" I stared at her in amazement. "You think we can start over after what you've done? People make mistakes. Marriages survive affairs all the time. This wasn't a mistake, Samantha. This was 8 months of deliberate choices. 8 months of looking me in the eye and lying. 8 months of stealing from your clients and using our son as an alibi." I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at our backyard where Tyler's swing set sat empty in the darkness. "Do you know what Tyler asked me today?" I said without turning around. "He asked if we were getting divorced. A 5-year-old child figured out that his family was falling apart because his parents can't even fight quietly enough to keep from traumatizing him. We can protect Tyler from this. We can keep things civil." "Civil?" I turned back to face her. "You want to keep things civil? Then you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up our family." Samantha was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "What happens now?" "Now you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Tomorrow morning, you're going to resign from Walsh & Associates. You're going to tell Megan that you can't work there anymore due to personal reasons." "I can't do that. It's my career." "Your career is over anyway. The fraud investigation will see to that. The only question is whether you resign quietly or get fired publicly. What fraud investigation? I smiled, and something in my expression made her go pale. The one that's going to start Monday morning when I turn over 8 months of evidence to the State Attorney General's office. You wouldn't do that. It would destroy me. Yes, it would. Completely and permanently. Samantha stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've changed, Jake. You're not the man I married. No, I'm not. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. The man sitting here now knows exactly who you are and what you're capable of. So what do you want? Revenge? I want justice. For me, for Tyler, for the clients you've been stealing from. I want you to face consequences for your choices. And if I resign from the firm, then maybe, I'll consider keeping the fraud investigation quiet. But the affair evidence goes to my lawyer either way. I'm filing for divorce next week. Small closed her eyes. I'll fight you for custody of Tyler. With what? You're about to be unemployed, under investigation for fraud, and documented as an adulterer who used her child as cover for an 8-month affair. What judge is going to award custody to you? The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. She actually gasped, understanding for the first time that she wasn't just losing her marriage. She was losing everything. Jake, please. I know I made mistakes, but Tyler needs his mother. Tyler needs a stable home with a parent who puts his needs first. That's not you, Samantha. That hasn't been you for months. I walked toward the kitchen door, then stopped and looked back at her. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Resign quietly, and maybe we can work out some kind of visitation arrangement. Refuse, and I'll destroy you so completely that Tyler will be embarrassed to have you as a mother. You're being cruel. I'm being fair. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I left her sitting in the kitchen and went upstairs to check on Tyler. He was asleep in his bed, clutching his stuffed elephant, looking peaceful and innocent in a way that made my chest ache with protective fury. This was what Samantha had risked. This was what she'd been willing to sacrifice for her affair with Brent Morrison. Our son's security, his happiness, his faith in the people who were supposed to protect him. I sat on the edge of Tyler's bed for a long time, listening to him breathe, thinking about the future we were going to build together. It wouldn't be the future I'd planned, but it would be honest. It would be real. And it would be ours. Downstairs, I could hear Samantha moving around, probably packing a bag. She'd go to a hotel tonight, maybe call Megan to cry about how unreasonable I was being. Tomorrow, she'd realize that her choices had consequences, that actions had prices, and that the man she'd betrayed wasn't going to make it easy for her. The confetti had been practice. The surveillance had been preparation. The confrontation with Brent had been a warning shot. But this was justice. Cold, calculated, and absolutely final. Samantha had wanted to play games with our family. Now she was going to learn that some games have winners and losers, and she had just lost everything that mattered.